One of the more interesting aspects about somatic and body-based psychotherapies, I think, is the way in which insight occurs and meaning is made. I would like to offer up two definitions about meaning making, or ways of meaning making, and to offer an example to illustrate what I think is the difference. Now, to begin, I just want to state my own bias. I was a long-term client of psychotherapy. I have been before becoming a psychologist. I was a professional client, you could say, about 20 years in psychotherapy, which is a long time by anyone's standards. And I truly found value in psychotherapy immensely. And yet there was always, as I was going through these traditional psychotherapies, there was always something missing for me. There was some way in which, even though I would do my homework and follow through with the exercises, the activities, I took it very seriously, something didn't quite shift for me. And I was always grappling since I was 6 with meaning making. And at first I thought, like so many people, if I can just make sense of why it's this way for me, why I'm like this, then perhaps I can change it, right? Perhaps I can get control over it. I can get mastery. And when I made the move into somatic psychotherapies, both personally and then professionally, there was something very interesting that I discovered about the meaning-making process. So, in contrast two ways of making meaning in terms of our lives and ourselves, our selfhood, there's a top-down approach, you could call it, and a bottom-up. So top-down is kind of like, it's what we traditionally think of when we think of insight. It is, I know why I'm depressed. It's because my aunt just died. Right, and that may be true, absolutely, and we might be absolutely spot on in how we're making sense of, we're kind of deducing, right? We're going, okay, depression, where are the circumstances in my life that would make sense of that, right? And then we produce an answer, and often we're pretty well on the mark. Top-down insight, because you're starting at the top with the overarching assumption, and then you're kind of finding out how your life sort of fits into that particular box. Again, this can be very accurate. And what I've found in my practice, personally and professionally, is that unfortunately a lot of the time we can be pretty off the mark, even when it seems like we are on the mark. So, and I'll illustrate this in a second, but first, the phenomenological, or the bottom-up way of making meaning is a little different. Rather than starting at the top with the assumption and then finding out how our life fits into that picture, we begin with the stuff of our lives. We begin with our immediate experiencing. The data, right, is in the present moment, and then we begin to construct a picture based on that lived experience, right? So there's the bottom up. The bottom is starting with the stuff of our lives, and particularly the stuff of our present moment experiencing, and then beginning to build up some kind of inductive reasoning. This is why it seems to be like this for me. This is why I seem to be this way, because this is what my life is telling me. And this is what my body is telling me about my life and my experience. This is the wisdom of my body. And so, again, top-down approach is kind of analytical or deductive. You're deducing why something is the way it is, and then how your life fits into that. And the bottom-up approach is really kind of starting with your experience and then inferring from that the larger picture or generalization in how it makes sense. So to illustrate with an example, I need coffee. Let's say that someone comes in with a spider phobia. Pretty common, right? A lot of people are afraid of spiders. And let's say that I wasn't always afraid of spiders. Let's say I loved them when I was like 7 years old. And then something switched for me. Now I'm 40 years old, let's say, and I'm thinking back on my life and going, okay, well, like, why did I switch? What made the difference that I would develop some kind of a phobia? And if I took a top-down approach, I could come into therapy for phobia reduction. And I could say, well, you know what? I know why. I think when I was 7 or 8 years old, there was a program that I saw on the Discovery Channel where I saw about spider bites and that they were dangerous. And before then, I didn't know that they were dangerous. And now that I do, or now that I did, then I started to get scared of them. Makes sense. It's a pretty good inference, and maybe that's true. Maybe something shifted in that moment for me with that phobia developing. But what often happens when you come into energy psychology or somatic psychotherapy and you take a bottom-up approach is a little different. From a bottom-up approach, I might start with the lived experience of the phobia. Just make sure this is recording. I'm new to this. Good. Thank you. Let's say that I come into somatic therapy and I have this fear of spiders. Let's say I'm sitting there and I start to get nervous as I'm thinking about their legs and the way they crawl and the little fangs and the beady eyes. And I'm starting to feel that anxiety somatically. It's my body's shaking, I'm noticing I'm quivering, I'm creeped out, I feel tense, I feel disgust. And we start with that. We start with the images that come to me. You start tapping through or working through it somatically. And I find that out of nowhere, this is really common, something totally random will happen in the midst of thinking about the spider. Instead, I'll get something that seems totally unrelated, like a neck pain. I'll get a neck pain. And I'll go, well, geez, I'm okay, so there's this spider phobia, but for some reason my neck just started hurting. I don't know what that's about, but, and we go, okay, well, what's the intensity? And you start noticing, well, yeah, it's actually really getting pretty intense. And you continue tapping, okay, we'll just stay with it. And then as we continue, another random association, which actually isn't so random after all, they'll say, I'm thinking about my brother. I don't know why. And we say, okay, well, let's just keep staying with the fear of spiders, but we'll notice that. You get the neck pain, and there's the thoughts about your brother, and you're still thinking about the fangs and the little beady eyes on the spider. And pretty soon, as we're working through and sort of holding all this in consideration, I might realize, I might have a memory come back to me. Oh gosh, I haven't thought of this in 30 years. But now I'm remembering, I'm 7 years old, and I'm out playing with my brother, and then all of a sudden my face is on the ground. He just beat me up into a bloody pulp, and I'm lying on the ground with my face in the grass, and nearby I see a spider crawl by. And that's the memory that comes back. By the way, this is fictitious. But so in this case, the meaning that's made is coming from sort of a bottom-up approach. We're starting with the body, and well, just to complete that thought, I suppose, so it may be true that I saw the Discovery Channel, a program about spiders at age 7, and I got kind of afraid of them at that point. But if we start with the body, what we can often find is a series of subconscious associations, right? So ultimately, I have come to associate the spider with that moment of physical and emotional trauma from a memory that I forgot about, right? So in that moment, spider became associated with the pain of getting beat up by my brother, right? And this is actually remarkably common. And we go, oh, I thought it was about the Discovery Channel program, and maybe it was to a degree, but actually there's something else happening in this meaning-making process. The spider was associatively paired with this other experience, this trauma, right? So again, just to contrast the two, the top-down approach can be remarkably helpful, and to a degree, this is for another video, the discussion on insight and meaning making, to a degree the top-down approach can be very helpful and productive and clarifying. You know, we need reflection, we need insight, it can enrich our lives, but often what we don't access, we've not been taught to access, is the immediacy of our own experiencing, and and as we reach deeply down into the body, we have stored all of these subconscious memories, and this place in us, in our bodies, is a place in which wisdom occurs. It's a place in which we deeply know, our bodies know vastly more than what we can consciously comprehend. And the strange thing about it, and the funny thing about it is, when we reach deeply enough into our own lived experience in a bottom-up sort of a way, we find that all these irrational behaviors, all of these self-defeating, sabotaging behaviors, and parts of our personality that we don't like and really irk other people or get under people's skin, they all actually ultimately make sense when we consult with our direct and lived experience.